So tell me how technology, first, is changing the way we organize.
Well, it's changing the way we can organize. I think the critical thing to understand about these new technologies is they're just new potential, right? What technology is doing is it's lowering the cost of people getting together. It's lowering the cost of people sharing, finding each other, collaborating, taking collective action. But the key thing isn't that the technology is doing that. The really essential force is that people want to do those things. Right? If you designed a great new shovel, people would not rush out to dig more ditches. Right? It's the desire of people to engage socially that's driving these tools. So every time someone comes up with a tool that makes social life easier, more fun, more appealing, wider scale, what happens to that technology is the most important thing that happens to that technology is the way it's driven by human motivation.
Yeah. But is this any different than the motivation for social networks? The reason that people want to be on a social network?
Well, there are so many. I mean, one of the interesting things about social networks is there are so many reasons now for people to want to be on them. They started very often as sort of dating sites and high school students who couldn't associate with each other because they were, essentially confined to quarters, and so they found each other through the internet. But what we've seen is that all of the social characteristics that people have, keeping in touch with people you knew, doing business with people, right? Facebook is really emerging recently as a significant challenge to LinkedIn, because people are realizing that if I'm embedded in a social network, there may well be a bunch of people I want to work with or hire or be hired by as well. Right. And so these like a trellis and a vine, Facebook is actually having a bunch of organic uses grow up around it as both the technology and people's use of it matures.
So what's necessary to have a spontaneous organization?
What's necessary
let me just take one example. I mean, if you look at sort of, there are all kinds of examples that are here in this book, but just think of it in terms of how it has been effective in political organization, not in terms of campaigns, but around protest.
Right. Well, the protest movement thing, I think, is a really good example of what's needed. It's two different things. It's some low-cost way to get to a lot of people, and some solidifying message that those people will rally around. One of the most remarkable political protests I know of is when 40,000 kids walked out of the LA Unified School District in March of 2006 to protest anti-immigrant policies. And that protest was organized in 48 hours, 40,000 people. You can't get 40,000 people to do anything in a month, right, without these kinds of tools. Suddenly, using Facebook and SMS, all of these kids are organized. So that's a remarkable thing.
But what had to be there before they could do that?
What had to be there was they had to have access to the technologies, in this case MySpace and SMS, but they also had to be bored by them. These things don't get socially interesting until they get technologically dull, because it isn't when people have a shiny new tool that they think is really fancy and cool. It's when they take it so completely for granted. If you look out now in the McCain and Obama campaigns, particularly with the nomination of Palin as vice president, suddenly email has swung into action. There was a lot of stuff on YouTube, there was a lot of stuff on Facebook, the sort of usual out front political things, but the political conversation now is among people just forwarding things by email. I mean, everyone in the audience will presumably have gotten one or more of these things if you're following politics at all. And email, of course, is the boringest tool ever. And for that reason, it's actually astonishingly effective.
All right, suppose we wanted to start an organization, to create a spontaneous organization, and let's say it's a protest. Let's say it's somebody coming to the United Nations that we want to protest because we have some grievance. Right. And let's not make it easy and make it Ahmadinejad. Let's make it, we have some particular argument against Sarkozy, let's say. Mm-hmm. Now, how would we want to create something if it was a protest? What would we start out doing, or would we need what before we could do that?
You'd need two things. You'd need a way to frame the argument that got people to act, not just to complain. which is actually a fairly high threshold on the internet. Yeah. And you need to know where those people already were. And that's the key thing. Yeah. There's still a lot of emphasis, I think, as a hangover for the 90s on building communities. Well, you can't build a community any more than you can make a friend, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. And so the idea of building communities, it's a little bit like if Henry Ford had said, oh, people are driving cars on roads, so we got to get into the roads business. It's like, no, you just go to where the roads already are. And I think a real key to this stuff is understanding people are not adopting these tools out of economic motives. They're adopting these tools out of social motives. They want pictures of their grandkids, or they want to find somebody to go out with Friday night. You've got to figure out where they already are and then reach them there.
Okay, so in but how do you figure out where they already are?
So there it's a question of, it's a combination essentially of immersion and tools, right? So you can start with any number of search tools. You can wander around Facebook. But you can also just spend enough time with the subject that you have a native sense of the medium. Right? And so people parachuting in from the outside who say, oh, all of a sudden I need to start an anti-Sarkozy movement, they're at a disadvantage to the people who say, you know what, the Francophone community is upset about this thing over here, right, and the Germans are upset about that thing over there. We can reach them both in English, and I know people in both communities. And it is that social bridging rather than just identifying and putting up banner ads that is the way these kinds of protest movements, really any of these social things that work. They're spread by the people Gladwell called the connectors.
All right. Suppose we want to do something in terms of product development and create a spontaneous organization.
Right. Right.
Because I remember when Jeff Bezos told me, when he came to do my show, when he launched Kindle, there was no massive organization. There was no massive ad campaign at all. I don't think there's been an ad campaign yet, right?
Yeah. Well, so
you have a product that you want to create.
Well, there's actually there's two interesting facets of the Kindle story. One is the creation, then two is the marketing of it. But for creation, the really amazing thing that's going on right now, both in the social sciences and in the practical realm, is this understanding of what Ron Burt's called the social origin of good ideas. Right? A huge number of really interesting opportunities are surfaced when there's an idea that comes from two or more different kinds of thought, right? The people likeliest to have innovative ideas in any organization aren't just designers or just engineers. They're designers who understand what the engineers are doing, or they're engineers who understand what the designers are doing. Yeah. And one of the things the internet's doing is it's just allowing an enormous shuffle of that deck. And so you see things like Alf Bingham's Innocentive, where they're sourcing ideas from all over the world. They're actually operating at a global scale to be able to invite people to submit ideas around particular innovative challenges. But you also see these amateur groups arising and attaining some kind of design sensibility that rivals and challenges the professionals. There was a kite design site for kite sailing, not little kid kites, but big person-carrying kites, called Zero Prestige. And they would just trade kite designs, and they would figure out new ways to do it. One of them had access to a wind tunnel. And then they would put up these kite designs. And then they were contacted by a manufacturer in China who, in a reversal of the usual outsourcing model, said, hey, I can download these, make them for you, and ship them to you. So suddenly the people with the production capability are sourcing design talent as opposed to the other way around. And the kite designers suddenly find themselves in competition with the professional kite design firms, and they have a big discussion. If we do this, are we going to kill the only people doing professional R&D? And so there's a real tension right now about what the right ecosystem is between professionals and amateurs, precisely because of this ability to innovate without needing a managerial organization.